Hey, how's it going? Good evening. Fifth time is a charm. Looks like everything is up and working, and I am hearing the feedback with the headphones in. So, yeah, it's very difficult to speak and think at the same time with that going on. I'm also my own cameraman tonight. This is a solo, no script, once again. So, let's see how this goes. All right. Just want to check something real quick. As I am solo, I wanted to see if this is actually working. Uh, Why it ain't working? Okay. I need to check. No, that is working. That's on there. I'm on there. I'm live. Okay. For some reason, it's just not showing up. Let's try this one now. Okay, now it's working. Sweet. I just need to make sure that the stream was actually working where people could hear me. Ah, yes, and the audio is synced up. So, all right, putting that down, on with the show. Here we go. All right, so welcome to EVA Live. This is a work in progress, so please pardon our dust. EVA, Electric Vehicles for All, is a nonprofit organization that I started, and I also have another company called Voltec Hybrid and EV Repair, where I rebuild battery packs for Toyota hybrids and actually all makes and models. I do full service on all makes and models of hybrid and electric vehicles. So my shop works exclusively on hybrid and electric vehicles. We do a lot more than that. I've been interested in working with electric vehicles since 2011. I got an awesome opportunity when I was out in LA to be in this training program. It was called Clean Tech Institute. You could still look at their website. And we converted two vehicles into electric, and that was back in 2011. And so ever since then, I had been, working to uh, try to make a business out of that, right? And me and another student from the class, we tried to do that for about a year after, and it was difficult because the overhead costs of having a commercial shop facility, especially in Los Angeles of all places, yeah, it was just too much money. And then once you got to, even if you had somebody that was interested in having their vehicle converted, once you got to the price tag of $20,000 just to get started, saying 10,000 for parts and 10,000 for labor, that was, and that's excluding the vehicle that you're using, to convert. So it's not cheap. It wasn't something you would do to save money. It's something you did because it was cool, and the operating costs of it would then be lower because it's electric. And yeah, if you drove it enough, it could pay itself off. And so what we were always interested in, though, was how could we bring that cost down? How could we make that feasible? And what we and many other people realized and started looking at was, well, we have other hybrid and electric vehicles that are already on the market. Could we take those and repurpose those components to make these custom projects that we want to do? And so that was how I got started down this road of working with used hybrid and electric vehicles, fixing them, and junkyard batteries, vehicles that are going to the junkyard, taking parts from them, seeing what's usable, what's not, and then refurbishing them. Like if it's a battery, taking it through a reconditioning process of charging, discharging, and balancing it, and running it through those cycles while recording the data and seeing its performance, and then using those parts to keep another hybrid or electric vehicle, whatever what that was, if it was a Prius, for example. So we took parts from one Prius that was, destroyed in an accident. We took what parts were usable, and we used it then on this other Prius to keep that Prius on the road. And so really the core areas that EVA addresses is, number one, that the people that would benefit the most from driving a hybrid or electric vehicle are the people that can't afford to own it. And number two, the best ways to get more hybrid and electric vehicles on the road is to keep the ones we already have on the road for longer. And number three is, if we do these things, we can meet these carbon reduction goals that we have faster using less resources and less money, while also creating good jobs and other things. So I say other things because I'm distracted, because I realized this is on the back there. So that is working. So I'm going to put that down. So what EVA does, though, is we are developing a program to be able to lease, or it's a subscription. So we take like a 2004 to 2009 Toyota Prius, and we rebuild it. We go through everything on it, new tires if it needs it. And again, using used and parts that we've refurbished as much as possible. It's not always possible to use used parts, and it doesn't make very much sense for certain parts. So, but where possible, and especially for the expensive or the carbon intensive parts of the vehicle, that's the most important. So yeah, what we do though is take a Prius like this and fix it like that, and have it so it's a certified, rebuilt, refurbished Prius now. Okay, so it's got a good battery. Everything has been gone through on this vehicle, and repaired and adjusted, and then we're making those vehicles available to people to purchase them if they want to purchase them. If they have that money, they can buy it outright if they want to, or they can do a lease to own, or they can do a subscription basis, which you may have heard about a company, Canoe, I think it's called, CANOO, West Coast, and that they're the first electric car maker to offer a 100% monthly subscription-based service, which a lot of people found very interesting, including myself, because, well, I've already been exploring that business model for the last 2 years. So although where mine differs is that I don't make any new cars. I take old cars and I fix them up and I keep them on the road. That's basically what I do. You might say, well, how's that different than a used car dealership or a junkyard? It sounds like what you're talking about is junkyards and used car dealerships. Well, there's a lot of things that makes it different, but I guess it's important to start with first that we're at about 3.5% of our vehicles right now in North America, that is, or the U.S. 3.5% of our vehicles are hybrid and electric. That's a small percentage, obviously, but it's a big number because we have a lot of cars. So anyways, though, it's important to start with that because that's where we're at now. So it's a new industry, right? It's the automotive industry, the transportation industry. It's undergoing the largest, most disruptive change that it's seen since the invention of the internal combustion engine. And I guess the transportation industry. Not there was no automotive industry before the ice. So the transportation industry is seeing the largest change, most disruptive change it's seen since the invention of the internal combustion engine. And so, what does that mean? Well, it means that we're in the very beginning of this process, and there's going to be lots of companies and research that may contradict each other, right, with their goals or what they think our priorities should be, whether it's hydrogen or a biofuel or different, or electric, right, or hybrids, or there's all these different ways to go about it. So, and while it may seem, depending on what you watch and read, that the consensus now is basically almost 100% that it's pure electric is the future. Well, I agree with that, but I don't agree with some of the timelines that they're setting with it. And what I mean is that I think, and according to the research that I'm doing and will continue to do, and actually produce graphs and other things that I can show to you here to back up what I'm saying, our resources may be better spent focusing on hybridization, electrification and hybridization of more vehicles versus full electrification of a smaller number of vehicles. Now, it's also worth noting that what would be the first vehicles to go after if you are trying to clean up carbon emissions? Well, commercial vehicles. Commercial vehicles use about 70% of our on-road fuel, if I'm recalling correctly. So you may ask yourself, well, then why is all this attention being placed on only 30% of the fuel that we're using for transportation? Well, we had to start somewhere. That's what I would say first. And then second, that's where the demand was. So we had to start somewhere. So the Toyota Prius, which was first released in Japan on a limited basis in 1997, that technology and the Honda Insight that came out in 2001, and then when the Toyota Prius came out in 2001 to the rest of the world, those were the first vehicles that were really made. Now, I know there's the EV1, which that's another discussion, which that did push progress along as well. But really, the the Toyota Prius and the Honda Insight were the first ones to be mass produced and really start creating this industry of hybrid and electric vehicles and electrification. So, without them doing that, we wouldn't be where we're at now. If they hadn't started that then, we wouldn't have the electric vehicle technology that we have today. And so, since, as I'm saying, this is a disruptive industry, it's not all figured out yet. And what EVA's goal, or one of EVA's goals, is to reduce carbon emissions and waste. So it's important to also bear in mind that carbon is what you'll hear me speak about the most, because it's an easy way. It's a good way, not easy, but it's a good way to really capture the energy or resource usage for something. But for manufacturing a vehicle, for example, and any car, doesn't matter if it's a internal combustion, hybrid, or an electric. It all takes number one, materials, right? So you got to mine the materials, and then you got to refine them, smelting, doing, for the steel, for every component, right? Transport that then from where, there's all these different steps. It gets transported along the way. Every time it's transported too, now this is beginning to change, especially in China, but most of the time these times it's being transported along this chain, it's going to be transported by a petroleum using vehicle, whether it's a cargo ship or a diesel truck or a earth mover, right? So even if you're building solar panels or batteries, I mean, there's a lot of materials that are required to do that. And building a whole vehicle, whether it's electric or not, uses a lot. So you got, your materials, the physical materials. Then you got energy, which there's a lot of energy that's required. So heat energy, mechanical energy, drilling things, cutting things, and of course all the electricity to run the equipment. So, and then counting that energy that I was speaking about, transporting it along the way through these different processes. So, but then there's also other things you can look at, like water usage. How much water was required? How much fresh water was required? And how it was used is important, right? I mean, if you're using 1,000 gallons of water a year, it's not that much. Whereas if you're using that amount, but then you were discharging it with some impurity or some chemical in it, which makes it you can't just discharge it into a field or something. Then now you've taken potable water and turned it into non-potable water, which we need water, fresh water, that is. So, but I'll have other videos about that. Some really great things with desalination, but that's a whole other topic. So, the reason why I'm talking about all that, it's basically what I'm really getting at here is that it's not set in stone where all of this technology is going. We do have a good idea, and electric is the future, but how we get to that future, that's what EVA's trying to be a part of. And my apologies for completely just skipping on whatever I was talking about before. I realized this is why people have co-hosts. So I say, what was I talking about? And I'd switch to the other camera angle there, but there's nobody else sitting here. So it's live. Yeah, this is practice. So anyways, so if we were to, let's just say, for example, if we could get to 10% electric vehicles on the roads by 2025, okay? So it's October of 2019. So it's almost the end of the year, so just about 5 years from now, okay? To get to go from about 3.5% hybrid and electric, I believe it's about 1.5%, 1 or 1.5% battery electric or pure electric vehicles right now for the United States. So going from that to 10%, all right, in 5 years. Compare that to going from 1 or 1.5% electric and 2% hybrid that we're at right now. What if we took that to 20% hybrid vehicles? All right, so what if you had twice as many hybrids as EVs? And then actually I could go a little bit further and say, well, what if we could have 4 times as many hybrids as pure EVs for the same amount of energy? And what I mean by energy is the amount of batteries that we would need to make that number of electric vehicles. There's only so many we can produce per year. So there's a finite amount, which means we should think about how we allocate those. Does it make sense to build a 300-mile range SUV that's a personal vehicle, right? That is not really, it may or may not be fully utilized. So that person might drive it 30 miles a day. It might sit, like most people's vehicles, 90% of the time. And this is where utilizing these vehicles is really important, because just like any other technology for renewable energy and sustainable transportation, the more you use it, the more it pays out. So if you put solar panels on your business, for example, the more electricity your business consumes, meaning like if you had a business that was using a lot of electricity, well, it makes a lot of sense for you to get solar, because the return on investment is faster, even though the initial cost may be higher, or even if it's the same cost, depending on what kind of capacity and performance you want. But the return is going to be faster the more that you use it. That's why it is important, and automakers have been discussing, the future of car ownership, which is not to own vehicles. We're clearly going in that direction, and individual car ownership will be a thing of the past in about 10 to 15 years. And it will be replaced by these leasing options and subscriptions, like what I'm talking about, monthly subscription, and even rentals, where you're an Uber or Lyft driver, for example, and you just want to drive on the weekend. So you can rent a Prius from us. There's already apps. What's it called? Hire Car, HYRE car.com, and they have an app. And I've spoke with some of their people. They were telling me in Metro Detroit area, which is where I am at in Michigan, that they were newer to our area, and this was like a year ago now. But they were newer to the Michigan area, but things were getting set up, and the going rate was $30 a day for a Prius, one of these, a 2004 to 2009 Toyota Prius. So this Hire Car is an app that lets you rent your personal vehicle to a Uber or Lyft driver, or certain other ones like Grubhub, gig workers, right? So it's a brilliant idea, and that's why I was so interested in it, because I was looking at these different leasing options. And so you can get $30 a day for one of these cars, to renting that to an Uber or Lyft driver. Why would they want to drive one? Well, they're going to save money. I mean, don't just take my word for it. Let's see if I can. No co-host here tonight, so. Let's see. Is this it? No. Anyways, it's an article. Yeah, here it is. From barons.com. Let's see. Check this out. You guys can also see. Once I got a video person to do this stuff, the easier. So you should be seeing what I'm seeing now on my screen. Excuse me one sec. I'm out of water. All right. So yeah, it was just an interesting article here that, let's see if you can see the title. Yeah. For Uber drivers, the key to making more money could be a used Toyota Prius. So Wolf's research automotive team crunched the numbers and concluded that driving for Uber and Lyft is a tough way to make a living. Yes, it is. About 30% of Uber drivers are losing money. But drivers might not be alone. California's recent law designating gig economy workers as employees, okay, that different stuff. They estimate that a ride on Uber or Lyft costs about $1.90 a mile, with $1.40 going to the drivers. But car ownership costs run 50 to 60 cents a mile, meaning that drivers net about 85 cents a mile. Wolf's numbers are top down national averages. The reality is more complex. At that rate, drivers have to travel 38,000 miles, with paying fares annually to earn the median income of $32,000. That's 150 revenue generating miles daily, roughly from Manhattan to Springfield, Massachusetts, working 5 days a week. That's not easy. The average ride is 5 to 6 miles. Yes, and their profits go much down, right? Every time you have to pick somebody up, get in your car, that's time that you're not driving, right? So, one solution for drivers, hybrid or electric vehicles. EVs make sense in higher use settings, says Gals. Yes, they do, says Jordan. They get better mileage and gas savings grow the more you drive. Yes, they do. EVs are pricey when new because batteries are costly, but buying used ones can lessen the pain. A 2015 Toyota Prius that gets 50 miles a gallon can be had for less than 14 grand. All right, let's go back to me for a sec. So they're saying what I'm saying, and actually I can make it even better, where they were talking about that they make the amount per mile they were making. I just read that. Oh, okay. Car ownership costs run 50 to 60 cents a mile. So what they're talking about there is, if you were leasing a vehicle, right? Let's just say you had a leased vehicle, and let's say the mileage that it had that you were allotted. That's another thing, right? You're only given a certain amount of mileage unless you have like an unlimited mileage lease. So let's say you had an unlimited mileage lease, and so you have and everything's covered, no service repair costs. Okay, that's what they're talking about there is your car ownership cost, plus, insurance, title, registration, all that stuff. But they're also talking about somebody that owns the vehicle, right? They bought it used. So they got the same insurance, registration, all that. And then the repair cost, though, service and repair cost is on them. So the more you drive the vehicle, the more wear and tear on it. So things will need to be fixed, right? The more they use it to work, the more service and repairs it will need. So that's why those 30% of drivers, a big reason why they're losing money. The other big reason why is if they were doing a financing through a used car dealership that does their own financing. So they're not all bad, but a lot of them are. And what they do is take advantage of people, low-income people. They say, no credit, bad credit, bankruptcy, foreclosure, doesn't matter. We take everybody. You just need a pulse and a social security number, and you get a car. Well, what kind of car do you get? Not a very good car. Not a very fuel-efficient car. And how much do you pay for it? Well, several times more than what it's worth. And if you miss a payment, they will shut the vehicle down on you and take the vehicle back, and you lost all the money you paid into it, and you still owe the rest of it, and you have nothing to show for it. It's a shame, really. And a lot of them claim that they're helping people, right? They're giving them this, well, nobody else is going to give them a vehicle, so we are. Again, not all financing dealerships are bad. I'm not saying that, but this is a systemic issue. I'm not talking about one specific one. I mean, they're all over the place. Definitely here in Metro Detroit. They're just all over the place. And if you hear about what some of these people are paying for, like a Pontiac G5 or something, or the G6, like a 2008 Pontiac, right? Paying a lot for an older vehicle, and it's not a hybrid or it's not an electric vehicle. So they're paying more money and they're driving a fuel inefficient vehicle. And so that's where they say car ownership costs run 50 to 60 cents a mile. And that impacts their bottom line, right? Meaning that drivers net about 85 cents a mile. So if we could reduce those car ownership costs, that would have a significant impact on their bottom line. And indeed, we can. And how much and how? How do I reduce those costs? Well, let's see if I can get through this without losing my way. I have nothing, well, I have things in front of me, but all right. So, how do we get the costs down? Number one, that financing I was talking about. So, those rates can be crazy for some people, and they can also be variable. Don't ever do a variable rate anything, in my opinion. I'm not a financial advisor. I can't give financial. Okay. But go do a fixed rate. I mean, you don't want variable rate. That's just not good. But anyways, so they can have these really high interest rates on them. So, so you might be paying $500 a month towards the car, right? But maybe after all the fees and everything, and if you had late fees, maybe only half of that money is going towards the car, you know? So yeah, you're paying $500, but only $250 is actually going towards paying off the car. The other part is interest, just paying interest, right? And the longer you take to pay it off, the more interest, the longer it takes to pay it off. So, and if you default, they take it back, and it doesn't matter if you were like 2 payments away from owning that vehicle. If you missed that last 1 or 2 payments, then sorry, buddy, they get to take that car back. Keep all the money that you gave them over the years, and they get to lease that to another person. Oh, and then your debt, they try to collect it, and once they can't, they sell it to a debt collection agency where they, cut it into pieces and then bundle it together as these subprime auto loan thing. Sounds a bit familiar. Subprime housing mortgage much? 2009 bubbles. Yeah, there's a few. This is one of them. The subprime auto loan bubble is on par with the student loan bubble and the medical debt bubble. We have those 3 bubbles right now in America. And yeah, it's not good. And you would think that something like that couldn't happen again. You would think that literally the exact same thing that caused the largest recession that our country has seen and the world has seen since the Great Depression, you would think that the exact thing that caused that, they wouldn't be able to do that, right? But yes, they can. Now that's a whole different thing. Like I said, let's see how far I can get before I go all over the place with it. But let's go back to this person, okay? They got $500 to spend on a car a month. So before, if they're going through this other financing company, it was like $250 going towards the car payment, $250 going towards the interest to the financing company, which a lot of times the dealership owns the financing company. So, so right there, your 50% is going to a middleman, right? I mean, not a middleman. It is literally a middleman. So, and then there's another middleman, so to speak, which is insurance. So if you were required to have full coverage, like collision and insurance policy to lease the vehicle, then that is also very expensive depending on where you live. So I live in Metro Detroit, Pontiac, basically. So we have the highest auto insurance rates in the country in Michigan. So requiring somebody to have full coverage insurance means they're not going to be able to afford it. So that makes a lot of people ineligible to lease a new hybrid or an electric vehicle because what do you need to lease a new hybrid or an electric vehicle? Keep in mind, number one, that those vehicles are expensive. New, right? When they're new, they are more expensive than your typical vehicle, right? So it's more money. And then also, you have to have good credit, right? And if you don't, you have to have a co-signer with good credit or excellent credit. You also need some type of down payment, usually, not always. And then you need that full coverage insurance, and that's the kicker, right? So, what EVA will do is we have different programs for different people depending on their needs, right? If you just want to buy a Prius or a Chevy Volt that's been gone through and reconditioned, right? You can do that. Or if you want to just rent one for the weekends because you're an Uber driver, you can do that. If you want to do a monthly subscription, you can do that as well. And actually, it's the monthly subscription that we're most excited about, and we believe that's the best option for most people. That's just not available right now, and so that means that if you were going to miss a payment, you could give the vehicle back and not default on it. Whereas in these other leases that people have, they don't have that option. The only option is to find somebody else to buy you out of your lease, which is not going to happen on a subprime, financed used POS. So when we do that, we have these different programs. Okay, so for like a Gen 2 Toyota Prius, your standard Prius, 2004 to 2009, okay, that's our most common vehicle. That's the most common hybrid. It's 50% of all hybrids are Toyota Prius. So, and it's the best out of all of them. It is the best. So, for a Prius like that, there will be a program where it's not required to have full coverage insurance. And there is a different video I'll make about, how that works and how, you still have to have liability insurance, of course, but this is a monthly subscription where you have a working hybrid or an electric vehicle, in this case a Toyota Prius, with all service and repairs included, everything on it. So excluding, there are terms and conditions. If you purposely drive our car off a cliff, yeah, well, that's not covered, but please don't do that, by the way. That's bad for the environment. Although it might be fun. Sometimes there's a few that I've wanted to do that too. Not that one or that one, but yeah, a silver one. So, okay, we're saving people money by, if they don't have to pay into that full coverage, and if they don't have to give their money to a financing middleman, right? So let's say this person had $500 total to spend on a car. They said, I have $500 total to spend on a car. So that's, we'll just say $200 for the car payment, and $150 for interest to the finance company, and $150 for the insurance, for a full coverage insurance, which that is cheap. In Michigan here, I really doubt you could get that low. Which means that when they go to a dealership, right, and they're seeing what car they could afford, they're saying, okay, well, you have $200 a month. Well, they do have $500 a month, but after you subtract for the financing and the full coverage insurance, they only have $200 a month. So under our system, we own these vehicles, so we can finance them. We can be the financing company, right? because we own them outright. So we don't need a middleman to do that financing for us. We do that ourselves. And then also because of our unique capabilities, which is the experience and facilities and resources to fix these vehicles, like a production line, basically. So that's important because if you're a dealership and you're leasing a vehicle out, you want them to have collision on it, because if there's a problem, you're going to have to send it to a collision shop, right? Or if there's mechanical things, unless you have your mechanics work on it, you're going to have to send it somewhere else. So, and the insurance company has to pay for that. Well, in our system, we do all the service and repairs and everything. You know, the financing, service, repairs, and we have our own risk pool, right? That's the whole thing with how insurance works, is risk pool. So we have our own risk pool that allows us to distribute the risk, and you can control the risk then. And that means that if it costs another place, if somebody gets into an accident and the insurance had to pay out, $800 to a shop to fix it, new fender or whatever it was, it might cost us like, $100 or $150 to do that, especially if we were using refurbished parts, used parts. So what that means is that our costs are much lower. So look at it this way, all right? If we paid out, let's say, $100,000 a year to a insurance company to protect our vehicles, our fleet of Priuses, and let's say we lost, a few of them, it was $20,000 worth, right? We lost 4 of them at $5,000 a piece. So we're out $20,000 on that. Well, the insurance covered that, right? They covered that loss. But we paid $100,000 for that year to have that coverage, which means we spent an extra $80,000. So if we would have just took that hit on our own and not had that policy, we would have saved $80,000. Yeah, we would have lost 4 vehicles, but we would have saved $80,000. And as long as you have a large risk pool and you have methods in place to ensure that you keep that number as low as possible, then that's how we're able to offer this. And what that means is that by doing this and by offering these leases and subscriptions, it's going to make hybrid and electric vehicles accessible and affordable to all. Thus the name, Electric Vehicles for All. So yeah, EVA, Hybrid Electric Vehicles for All. I don't think it would have the same ring to it, but yeah. So anyways, and that's very important to get this mass adoption. You'll hear that term used a lot in this industry, or these discussions about sustainable transportation, is mass adoption. We need mass adoption. And they'll talk about, well, what's required to get mass adoption? Well, better electric vehicles with longer range and, cheaper, more charging stations, which those are all valid. But I think one of the biggest things that is being overlooked is the service and repairs side of it. And the fact that people don't really feel comfortable. The biggest questions I'll get from people that don't drive a hybrid or an electric vehicle, or if they're new to it, is, oh, what about the battery? I heard it costs, $5,000 to fix a Prius battery. And no, it does not cost $5,000. Voltec's price is $2,200 out the door, by the way, for a brand new OEM battery, not cylindrical. I guess that's a promo, but that's a dang good price if you look around, with a 2-year warranty. So, but back to what I'm saying, mass adoption. Well, the best way to get more hybrid and electric vehicles on the road is to simply keep the ones we already have on the road for longer. I mean, it just makes sense, right? So, and the best way to do that is to do what I'm talking about, which is to repair and refurbish these for as long as is practical. And then after that, then we find second and third life applications for all of the components of the vehicle, not just the batteries, like so many other people focus on just the batteries. There's a lot of other great components in hybrid and electric vehicles that you'll only find in those vehicles. And things like DC-DC converters, inverters, and, power inverters, and even just the cooling pumps and things like that. I mean, if you got some high school kids or something, and you got a drone robot project or something, you want to build a robot, well, you should be using OEM grade automotive components from literally from the junkyard. You can go pull them out of these cars, and it doesn't even have to be from hybrid and electric vehicles. I mean, just like switches and things like that. I mean, the fans and blowers, but especially the things that you'll find in hybrid and electric vehicles. There's a lot of great things in there. So, and that's another side of what EVA does, where I'll make more videos about that. This is simply me ranting and really just practicing. Getting my setup working here. It's been a bit stressful. I've had to learn Mac and all that. Oh, relearn it. So, yeah, that's been a lot of fun. But if we get mass adoption, this is how we get mass adoption. You do this, you make these vehicles available, we keep them going, and we make them available to people at these low costs where there's no surprises, right? The average American can't afford a $500 emergency. So, but they can afford, a known maybe $500 a month, but not a $500 emergency, right? So they can afford a certain amount per month. And what they can't afford is a $2,000 repair bill. As good as Voltec's prices are on a new Prius battery, $2,200 is vastly more than most Americans have. And, that's just the current state of things. So, my whole process with Voltec over these last 5 years has been to develop a better business model for my customers. Voltec's mission statement was making hybrid and electric vehicle ownership affordable and practical for all. And I didn't realize how challenging that actually was until I really started getting into this. And, I first started with just rebuilding batteries and branched into, I worked on motorcycles and a bunch of other stuff before that too. So I wasn't afraid of the mechanical, but I mainly was rebuilding batteries. But then I moved on to full service with them, and I had people coming to me, and have people coming to me all the time still, that they're coming to me as like the last hope, right, to save their Prius or their Honda Insight or their Ford Escape hybrid. And so if I couldn't do something for them, then that was going to be it. Their next step in most of those cases was to sell it, for whatever they could get. And a lot of them were very sad to see their beloved Prius go. And so myself, also being a Prius owner, I usually ended up doing things for less money than I should, because I actually care about this industry and, getting these vehicles to the people that benefit the most from them. If you can afford, $120,000 Tesla, saving money on gas is really not your main priority, I don't think. I mean, if it is, then wow. But anyways, Um, but your average American family, it's a huge difference if you're talking about saving them, anywhere from, 50, $100 to a couple $100 a month, maybe thousands of dollars a month, depending on how much they were driving before and what they were driving before. If they were going from a 8.5 miles per gallon, 98 Dodge, it's getting 8.5 miles per gallon, and then they hop into one of these at 50 miles per gallon. Well, that is huge, huge difference. And if they were doing a lot of driving, that's a lot of money, and that's a lot of carbon emissions that will be prevented from going into the atmosphere and into the oceans. So if you care about that, then this really is the best way that I've discovered. Because currently the plan right now, okay, is to just build more hybrid and electric vehicles. Like the plan to get our emissions down. I'm simplifying here. I'm talking about for the transportation industry, not all sustainability, but they're basically just trying to build more electric vehicles and more charging stations. So my analogy for this is, okay, let's say you got a boat and it's taking on water because it has some holes in the bottom, and you're sitting there bailing it out with a bucket, and you're telling people, man, we got to get this water out of here. We got to get it out of here. I need a bigger bucket, and I need to go faster. I just need a bigger bucket, and I just need to go faster. Well, and then somebody comes along and says, hey, why don't you plug some of those holes in the bottom of the boat, and then you wouldn't have to bail so fast. You wouldn't need a bigger bucket. You could just use the same size bucket you had right now, and you wouldn't need to go faster. You could go at the same rate you were going. If we just slowed down those leaks, we don't even have to stop them, right? But just slow them down. If you got a huge hole in the bottom of your boat, well, you can do all the bilge pumping you want. Your first priority should be to stop that leak, right? That's just obvious in this example. But here, it's something that's kind of, again, it's a new industry. So these solutions, it required somebody to come along and figure this stuff out. So anyways, yeah, the solutions here. All right. By doing that, by stopping that leak, slowing down the leak. All right. If you say we want to get to 20% electric vehicles by 2020, okay, 20% electric vehicles in 2030 is what I meant to say. By 2030, about 10 years from now. 10 years from now, there's going to be a lot more vehicles on the roads, which means, 10% or 20%, whatever I just said, by 2030, it's a lot more than it is now. So there you have that factor to deal with, and then you also have what I just said. You're losing a certain number of hybrid and electric vehicles per year. We're losing a certain number of all vehicles per year from accidents, floods, fires, right? So if we slowed down that loss rate for how many we were losing, we would increase the rate at which we're gaining, or let's say increasing the percentage of hybrid and electric vehicles on the road, right? So basically, let's say it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, right? So every year they build 2 new electric vehicles, but we also lose 1 every year. So it continues at this just 1 more per year. Well, if you saved that 1, so I said 2, which means, yeah, okay. If you want to change a percentage, this stuff gets a little bit with time and changing a percentage, okay? just to keep it at whatever percentage it's at now, you have to keep producing X number of electric vehicles per year and going up, like I said, because the total number of vehicles on the roads is going up. But then also, yeah, so if we're saying we want to increase the percentage, that means we not only have to build all the ones we were building, we have to build more than that now, right? And so, yeah, if you build 2 new ones in this year, but you lost one, well, then that one of those new ones that you built kind of offsets the other one, and the other one gives you like that one vehicle gain, right? So you increased it by that percentage. That, well, if you didn't lose that other vehicle, then that would actually be going up. That would be effectively adding 2. You're doubling. It's doubling it. And, actually, I have a graph, if I can find it. Let's see. I had a bunch of graphs down here. Oh, no, that's live streaming. Sorry, folks. I did have them all laid out. I swear to you. Yep. Yeah, here they are. Let's start with this one. Let's see. Can you see that on? You can see that on here. So, kind of. But I'll switch to this too so you can see it better. So what this is a graph that I made the other night. This is for a Toyota Prius, Gen 2 Toyota Prius. So looking at the differences in cost for a new, used, and rebuilt battery. And it's important to point out here there's so many different ways you could break these numbers down. There's so many assumptions that I have to make in this. But the good thing is that I've based these assumptions off the numbers that I use at Voltec for what I charge for these different things and what I know to be the going market value for these services and for these products. So I'll switch back to me. So what you see, first of all, the new battery, okay, my price is $2,200 for Voltec, but for simplicity here, it's $2,000. Okay, it's cheating a little bit, but all right, $2,000. All right, and if we assume that battery can go 200,000 miles, which they can and they do regularly. That's about 90% of them tend to make it to that mileage. That's typically what we see. Now, especially keep in mind, if you're buying a new Prius battery, even for a Gen 2 Prius, but you're buying it now in 2019, that's the latest modules that they're using. They're still using nickel metal hydride, right, in all of their vehicles. So, yeah, I just realized I got to face the microphone when I'm saying this. So I'll switch back to it this way. So you'll see the green ones at the bottom are, that's for a new battery. And so this graph goes to 200,000 miles. We start from 0 and we go to 200,000. So if the battery costs $2,000 and it goes 200,000 miles, you could say the cost per mile is 0.01, which is 1 penny per mile. So if you got a used battery for $1,000 and it had 100,000 miles on it, so you should be able to get another 100,000 out of it. Now, I have adjusted that slightly. You would say, well, wait a second, that should be 0.015 then if it's half the cost. That's 0.02. Yes, I did change it a bit because a battery at 100,000 miles is not the same as a battery at 0 miles. You're not going to get the same mileage and performance. And factoring in the age is important as well. So, you get the new battery, it's brand new. So you're I've factored that in with this price, with this dollars per mile. So it's twice though. It's 2 cents per mile instead of 1 cent per mile. Okay. Now a rebuilt battery. If Voltec rebuilds your battery, it's $500, and that includes up to 4 replacement modules and a 1-year warranty on those replacement modules only. So your old battery modules are not covered under that warranty. And we do recondition, run it through charge, discharge, and balance cycles and test. And if I believe a battery's not worth rebuilding, then I am going to recommend against rebuilding it. Now, sometimes people just need to get the vehicle running, and I get that. And like I said earlier, $500 is kind of the magic number in America, as 50% of Americans can't afford a $500 emergency. So anything over $500 is usually out of the price range for about 80% of my customers, 90% of my customers, I would say. So at that price, $500, all right? How did I get 5 cents per mile from that? Well, I got 5 cents per mile because I assumed first that you could get another 20,000 miles out of that rebuild. All right, so let's say you came in at, it had 180K on it, and we rebuild it. I'm assuming that it'll make it to 200K. So 20,000 miles. And then also, if you did that price, I believe that's 2.5 cents per mile. So I multiplied that by 2. Why? Because just like how a 100,000 mile used battery is not going to perform the same as a brand new battery, a rebuilt battery is going to perform the worst out of all of those. So your MPG will not be as high, which, keep in mind, is kind of the whole point of driving a hybrid in the first place, right? So, but it's not just that. There's also this really big issue, which is, switch back to me, breakdowns. How much does it cost when you break down? Do you have towing included with your repair or with your insurance, right? How far are you in another state, right? I mean, those are, and then what is that worth to you, right? Like, can you afford to break down? What if you're on your way to an important meeting? I mean, that's a tough question. Now, some people, like me, maybe are fine with, having a battery pack that's been rebuilt. Most people don't really have a choice because that's all they can afford. So what I have shown here, though, and I just finally made this, but once I really crunched the numbers on this, so for the $500 rebuilt battery, that gets you another 20,000 miles. Well, I multiply, that's 2.5 cents per mile, and then I actually multiplied that by 2 to give 5 cents per mile to factor in the reduced performance and, basically a breakdown, whatever needs to happen then, and it needs to be rebuilt. So that's how I got 5 cents a mile. And you could see how, and again, I'd have to play with this graph maker more, but really the green, they all started at whatever price they started at. So that's, with this graph, it's off on that. But, the new battery was 2,000, the used was 1,000, and the rebuilt was 500. So here's the deal with the new. The new really should just be a flat line right across at, going all the way. It's $2,000 and it gets you 200,000 miles, right? Simple enough. And we're saying that the used one does get you 100,000 miles, but it doesn't perform as good. That's why it has a slightly higher operating cost. And the rebuilt, the reason why the rebuilt just goes way up like that is because every 20,000 miles, you might have to rebuild it. You might have to replace another module. How many times can you do that? Well, there's 28 modules in a Prius pack, so 27 times, I guess, if you're just doing one per time. So, and if you were paying me or somebody else, $500 every time, yeah, that would suck. So, um, once I crunched those numbers, those days, right? My output bit rate is low. Okay, hopefully it'll keep going. Hopefully you're still seeing me, hearing me. Dang, that broke my chain of thought. I need a drink. So I had some green tea, not alcohol. I don't drink alcohol, not really. Just don't like it. But I was just telling them, man, you're back out here now for your second time. For the money you've spent now, you would have been more than halfway to that new battery. But he just said, yeah, but I can't afford that. And that's when I really realized, hey, I got to figure out a better way. Because here I see these huge savings, right? People could save all this money driving these vehicles. Well, and I want to help them do that. So I looked at battery leasing. That was one of the first things I looked at was, well, what if I just lease people batteries, right? And it makes a lot of sense. Like, they can't afford that high cost out of pocket. So if I leased it to them, they could afford that. And then it gets even better in some ways because, yeah, these batteries go 200,000 miles. Well, if you got a Prius with 250,000 miles on it and you're going to put in a battery that's going to take another 200,000 miles, well, you can do that. And we do that all the time. But there's going to be some other things that will need attention, right? So it's not just the battery. There's a lot of other stuff. So that doesn't make sense then. Even if they could afford it, they're like, well, why am I going to put that? I'm only going to keep this thing like for another couple years. It doesn't make sense, right? Well, that's why if we're leasing it, it does, or like renting it, if you will, makes more sense. And then really, what I realized though was that it's not about the batteries. This is about the vehicle. It's about having a whole working vehicle, the hybrid or electric vehicle, whichever one it is, right? Without the vehicle, doesn't really matter. The battery doesn't really matter without a vehicle. So I said, well, why don't we just take the same concept for leasing and rebuilding batteries? Why don't we just expand that to the whole vehicle and have a dealership that just does hybrid and electric vehicles, which is in the process now, by the way, and should be opening in November. So we'll keep you updated on that. And then I went even further with that when I realized the carbon reduction that would be possible if we started doing this on a mass scale. Because something that's really important with this is, like I was talking at the very beginning, it takes a lot of resources and a lot of carbon to manufacture any vehicle, whether it's a hybrid or an electric or regular. So, yeah, it takes a lot of carbon to do that. And we're building these to reduce carbon. So we should ensure and do everything that we can to ensure that the ones that are built, they stay on the road for longer, right? That we make the best use possible. And so when we keep a Prius on the road for another year, that's another year that another hybrid or electric vehicle is on the road, saving all this emissions from going into the air, right? And saving people money. And that was the other thing. Like, if somebody can afford a $500 car payment, right? And before, 150 was going to the financing company and 150 was going to full coverage insurance. Well, under our system, like I said, now they just got liability insurance to pay. There's no variable financing, rate, nothing like that. This is a flat. It's $200 a month, and then it's 7 cents a mile or whatever it is for whatever vehicle you're driving beyond that. And so yeah, what I realized was that, yeah, if we could do that and make these available mass like that, sorry, it's getting late. I'm losing track of my thoughts with that. But yeah, it's okay. Yeah, the carbon reduction from doing that is huge, because you're essentially creating another hybrid or an electric vehicle using very little resources, whatever resources it took to fix it, right? Not make a whole new one, right? Because if we say, well, yeah, this Prius needs a new transmission, it's only worth, 3 to 4 grand at that year in mileage anyways. So, well, why pay a mechanic $3,000 to put in a transmission? Well, there's other types of value. That's just market value that you're thinking of there. What is the car worth in dollars in our market? But there's other types of value. There's carbon reduction value, and then there's utilitarian value. I mean, that's what I call it, at least. So carbon reduction, pollution reduction value. How much does this reduce carbon? And then utilitarian. What value does this provide to the people and to the community, right? So those are other things you can measure, and there's a lot of other things you can measure as well. As far as value, what value does something have? But when people talk about these cars, they're only going to talk about the market value. Why would I spend $3,000 to fix a $3,000 car? Yeah, that doesn't make sense with the market value. But it makes total sense when you think about the carbon reduction value and the utilitarian value. So what do I mean? So, well, you say it costs $3,000 to change a transmission on one of these. Well, it doesn't, because we can get those transmissions for $300. Whole engine and transmission for one of those you could probably get for $500 or less. So what it is, though, is it's labor cost. That's a lot of labor, and having a shop that has done that or is comfortable doing that, like most shops are not going to do that work. And that's what I always went towards, was the stuff that other people didn't want to do because it was too hard. I was like, that's an opportunity. I'm going to go for that. If I could just figure out a way or get good at, find some new technique or something of doing this thing that's hard to do and nobody else wants to do, then yeah, that's all labor costs. I could, that would be profitable. So, what does it really cost then to fix the transmission, to put in a used, let's say a refurbished transmission? So came from another vehicle that was in a bad accident, but we pulled the engine and transmission and a lot of other parts from it. We refurbished the battery pack and the transmission. I just cleaned it up, new fluid, went through things, take covers off, make sure, do some tests that everything is within spec, and clean it up and put it in. So let's say $300 is what we got that from the junkyard for the transmission. So, and then I had to pay two of my technicians, we'll just say $20 an hour, and for a total of 20 man hours, but there's two of them, so 10 for, so, but 20 hours so that's $400 if it was $20 an hour, with 20 man hours. So two people together could do it in 10 hours technically. Well, not technically, you can, but so that would bring the cost then to $700, right? $700 compared to $3,000. Oh, and by the way, if you went to the dealership and got a quote to have your transmission replaced on a 2004 to 2009 Prius, it would be probably about $5,800. Yeah. So obviously nobody's going to do that, and obviously nobody should do that. Why would you spend that much money on a new component when it's not even necessary. So there's plenty of these used ones available. So that's the basic idea of what we do. You know, you just keep the old ones on the road for longer, and then we make these available to people. And not only are they're gonna save money off the financing part, like what I was talking about, and they have a reliable vehicle now too, with all the service and repairs included. They're gonna save money not having to have a full coverage policy. But then the bonus round is that if they were driving a normal vehicle before, which a lot of these people are or would be, right? This would be the first hybrid or electric vehicle for them. They're going from, 10 miles per gallon to maybe 25 miles per gallon, right? To something that's now getting 45, 50 miles per gallon. So they're saving a significant amount of money per month, which means you've gone beyond just saving somebody money on something. You've, in essence, created money. Now, there's two ways to look at that. Saving $1 is basically the same as being given $1 from your wallet's perspective. In both cases, it has one more dollar than it did before. So that is something that when we talk about renewable energy and sustainable transportation, and specifically carbon offsetting or carbon negative technology, so solar and wind power and micro hydropower, once they've repaid their initial carbon debt that it took to create them, then everything past that point, every kilowatt that they generate past that point, is considered carbon negative. Well, they're not actually pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. What they're doing is they're generating electricity from this clean source that's not releasing carbon and replacing that with, power that would have came from releasing carbon. So that's offsetting, or, well, actually that's not offsetting, that's just eliminating the need to burn that other carbon, basically. So I guess you could say offset. But there's two ways of reducing carbon. Yeah, in the atmosphere, we either literally pull it out of the air using plants, planting trees or machines that do that, or B, we develop technologies or improve the efficiency of existing technologies that release carbon. These are things that already release carbon, and actually a lot of carbon, right? When you're talking about vehicles, they release a lot of carbon. So when you make those more efficient and reduce the amount that they release, well, the net result of that is the same as pulling it out of the air, with a little asterisk by it. There's other stuff. It gets really complicated. You can go down a whole rabbit hole on this stuff. But yeah, I mean, basically that's the long and short of it, is that, if you save if you prevent it from going in the atmosphere, that's just as good as pulling it from the atmosphere. So yeah, so that's how something that actually releases carbon could be considered carbon neutral, right? So, but this is the reason why companies do zero down solar. Okay, how can they do that, right? How can they put solar on people's roofs for nothing? Well, they are the company that they make the panels, right? So their cost for the panels is much cheaper than what your cost buying it as a consumer is. Two, so they're doing their own financing then, right? It's like they're their own financing company. And then these solar panels actually are generating electricity, which is money. Energy is money, electricity is money, and vice versa. And so it's actually generating money. When you put solar panels on your roof, you could think about it like pennies raining from the sky all day, every day. And most people don't seem to notice it's there, but you put these special collectors up, and they catch these pennies, right? That's basically what solar is. It's catching pennies falling from the sky constantly, and which means that a solar company can put solar for zero down on somebody's roof, and it pays itself off. And after 10 years, the people own the panels, and the payments that were made on it were made from the savings that was saved from not having to go to the electric company, and it instead goes to the solar company. And so that's their business model, for solar. And it's great, right? I mean, that's a win-win, and win-win-win if you want to include the environment, which I do. So that's the same thing here. We can do this cheaper because we do our own financing, and we don't require the full coverage insurance. And then the vehicles these people are driving are saving them money. So, that's basically that. I'm getting redundant at this point, so why don't we just for the heck of it, before, what time is it? 12. Wow, it's 12:30. I had a bunch of articles and things I was gonna read, talk about. Excuse me one sec. I got my tea sitting over here. My tea, green tea. I love it. It's live TV, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, they were talking about the Dyson Mobile, and that it went down. But I thought, I haven't even read this article yet, but it's from South China Morning Post, and it just says, inventor James Dyson shows electric cars are too easy to make. That's why his $2.5 billion project was doomed to fail. I thought that was an interesting choice of words, right? Too easy to make. I haven't read the article yet, so I don't even know what it says, but you may have heard how they ditched their plan to make the thing. They're not going to do it. They said it was a great car, but it was just financially not, profitable, which is, true. And this company was going to go on and, this article. Okay, just talking about how, the electric motors are, these are easier to make, so everybody thinks they can make them now, right? Apple's making a car. Tesla, of course, makes cars. So people think, well, we could do that too. Maybe. But just because you could make a computer or a vacuum cleaner does not mean you can make an electric vehicle. Now, they're similar, but they're very different. So there's a lot of things with cars, literally and figuratively. What was this one? Nah, that's not really that interesting. I'll go back to my beginning. I literally just start with Google News and type in electric vehicles, and then just start clicking on articles, whatever I thought, was most interesting. Yeah, V8 size EV conversion crate motor for classic cars. Yeah, that's kind of cool. EV charging stations are still few and far between for the rest of us who don't drive a Model 3. Yeah, that's something I was wondering, why doesn't Tesla allow other people to charge their cars? Like, I know that people say, well, they want to ensure that only Teslas can charge. Well, okay, fine, then give Teslas priority, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen charging stations, at least around here, Tesla charging stations with no cars charging, or one, and a bunch of empty stalls. So, if my company, which my company is devoted to sustainability, if I was devoted to that, I would say let's hey, if a Tesla driver isn't trying to use, the charging stall, then sure, we should let anybody else use it. Maybe they have to pay. Okay, they're not going to get free supercharging, but give them some juice, something, right? But no, no, they don't. And what does that mean? Well, good luck finding a convenient fast charger, according to this person. What's the best way to grow electric vehicle charging infrastructure? This is from Clean Technica. They're good. They put out a lot of articles. Increased battery capacity, wireless charging. Yeah, I'm probably not going to talk about that tonight. Oh, I thought this was interesting because this is from my hometown here, from the Detroit News. Dyson becomes latest sign that the electric car bubble is bursting. So, all right. Dyson's sudden decision to scrap its $2.5 billion ambitions. Blah blah blah. Okay, why do they say though? What's their reason? Tesla's future remains uncertain. Almost all the EV startups trying to follow look challenged, according to this analyst. Most of these startups will likely fold. The truth is, barriers to entry in autos remain high. Making cars is hard. The move to EVs will be expensive. I couldn't agree more on those points. To which some people would say that I'm in with the Detroit global oil conspiracy. No, I'm not. There's no conspiracy here. Now, I do agree with what Jack Rickard was saying from EVTV that yes, there are notorious forces out there trying to take down Tesla. That is true. But also, just because the big three says something may be difficult to do, it doesn't just mean that they don't want to do it. It might actually be difficult to do. Maybe. And that's what this article is saying. That it was sounding pretty good there for a minute. Take the case of China's NIO Inc., one of the most prominent electric car makers in a country that makes about half of the world's EVs. Last month, it reported a wider than expected quarterly loss, leading the stock to tumble to a record low and prompting an analysis to openly question the company's viability. The shares jumped on Tuesday after NIO reported third quarter deliveries exceeded the company's forecast, but the stock has since erased all those gains. Elsewhere in China, Lifan Industry Group and Zotye Automobile Company have denied speculation they plan to file for bankruptcy, but the former concealed it's under liquidity pressure. The competition is getting tougher. Besides Tesla, traditional automakers such as General Motors, Volkswagen are throwing massive resources into electrification. VW has vowed a $33 billion push to bring battery-powered autos to the masses. Apple has had an automotive project since about 2016, although it's said to have scaled back its ambitions. Interesting. There are growing concerns that the ample supply of cheap funding for new age car makers is about to dry up, according to Bernstein. As to Dyson, the company said it plans to continue its $3.1 billion investment program in new technology and will focus on manufacturing solid-state batteries and other technologies, including machine learning and robotics. Okay, and then that's Dyson talking about it, but and they said, despite Dyson's decision, Singapore remains interested in advancing manufacturing activities, including for EVs, he said. Um, Experts had questioned the company's costly plans to build an electric car plant in Singapore, where average salaries are among the highest in the world. Ford Motor Company closed its factory in the city state about 40 years ago, effectively ending car production on the island. If everybody else is building a plant in China at a fraction of the cost in terms of labor, it didn't make a lot of sense for anybody to build that size of a manufacturing facility over there. Back to me. So, yes, it's expensive to make these vehicles. We're at the very beginning of this transition. So, you're going to see a lot of startups that are going to make big claims, and they may have a great prototype. And in a few years from now, you won't remember them because there'll be other new shiny ones that have come along, and whatever that one was, it didn't work out, and people forget about it. A lot of those show up. We work on vehicles like that. We get vehicles like that, like the Coda electric vehicle, for example. The really weird ones, obscure ones. That's what we like. What's going to happen with those, right? I mean, if you have a car where they only made 3,000 of them in like 2 years, and then the company went bankrupt, you can't get parts anymore for it. What are you going to do? Are you just going to throw out all those cars, recycle them? Recycling takes energy and all those resources, right? So if you could keep those vehicles on the road for longer, that would be great. Or if that's just not practical, then maybe you could make wind turbines from the motors, and maybe you could use the batteries that only have 50% of their capacity left or something like that. You could use them in some type of other application that's just not as power intensive. So GM offers to make electric pickup in Detroit as UAW pushes for more U.S. made gas vehicles. Yeah, I heard this. And this is something that I'll continue. And Luke's not here with me tonight, but we'll continue to cover. Of course, is this strike with GM, and it's interesting. Yeah, I heard one of the UAW people saying that what they want them being GM to make is these more traditional gas-powered vehicles, and that the electric vehicles that they're making just don't require as many jobs, and because there's more, first of all, a lot of it gets done out of house, right, because it's a new technology. A lot of them now are not actually designing their own battery packs. They're having other companies like LG just design the battery pack completely and say, here's a battery pack, right? And so there's that whole part of it. Not everything is being done in-house. And then a lot of it is being automated. And the same is true for regular cars. But then also really what they talked about was at the dealerships and all that service for the technicians. I know that's not UAW, but they're saying, well, those jobs are going to become less and less too. Well, yes and no, because those same mechanics could just retrain themselves to be hybrid and electric vehicle mechanics like me. So, yeah, that's okay. There was one job that was lost, but you created a new one. But it's interesting that they're saying the UAW is pushing for more gas-made ones. They don't want the electric because they don't require as many jobs. So, yeah, that's just not. It's not a good way to go about things because we need to go with the market, not against it. But we need to ensure that we don't destroy too many people's livelihoods in this process, right? I mean, yes, this is about saving the environment, but it was also about helping people, right? And so we need to keep these things in mind, right? Like, who benefits from these new technologies and who loses, right? I mean, there's some some type of cost involved, right? If you live in China, for example, and you live next door to where they're mining lithium, I mean, that has an impact on the environment. So now the idea is that we are, yes, we may be causing some harm, but in a controlled way, and then the good that's going to come from that is going to pay over many times, which it does generally. Depends on the vehicle, right? If you made this really great, like they said in this other article here, like Dyson has spent, I think, like $2.5 billion on research and development. And okay, people talk about carbon footprints for the vehicles themselves, and even for the manufacturing, but there's a carbon footprint for everything you do. Brushing your teeth, I mean, the toothpaste, right? Running the water. I mean, like everything. You could break it down to there's some carbon footprint involved if it uses energy or resources. So you'd say, well, they never really produced any cars though, so it's not like they left a big mess or anything. Well, they spent $2.5 billion making prototypes and things that ultimately didn't succeed. I'm not going to say it was for nothing. Hopefully they gained some knowledge that could be shared and passed on, maybe. But just think about that. How much carbon was that? I mean, $2.5 billion. I don't know how much of that was on materials, how much of that was labor, but even labor. I mean, you pay your engineers. I mean, your engineers have to eat lunch, right? They're a human. They have a carbon footprint. So that's something that people usually don't even consider, is how much more carbon there is for research and development on these vehicles compared to traditional vehicles. That's something that's not even factored in currently, at least from reports that I've seen. Analysis that I've looked at don't take that into account when they're looking at the total lifetime carbon emissions. So but what I find interesting about this article was that I think we can get these jobs back for these people, and in the plants that they were working in, and they mentioned specifically the Hamtramck plant, which I was working to try to put together a deal to have GM basically donate usage of that facility to EVA or to the people of the city of Detroit in Michigan, and use it as a co-op machine shop, and use it as a factory to rebuild these vehicles and Chevy Volts and other vehicles like that, right? And refurbish them, rebuild them if it was in an accident, do the whole thing, all inside a factory. How beautiful would that be, right? To have workers that were laid off in a plant that was going to be closed or is going to be idled, right? To bring those people back in, put them back to work at a good job, working on these hybrid vehicles, and wouldn't that be great? And that would be a great way for GM to turn this bad press into good press for them, and it wouldn't cost them anything, really. Actually, it cost them money to idle the plant. It costs more money to take all the equipment out and tear it down than it does to idle it, which is why they just idle it. But keep in mind, the people of Detroit, there was 3,000 homes that were demolished. What was it, 3,000 or 6,000? 10,000, a lot. I'm forgetting the exact number now. And 600 small businesses and 30 churches or something. Like, there's a lot, right, to make that. The people of the city of Detroit gave a lot to GM to let them build that plant. And, they kind of just turned around and stiffed everybody. And, considering that the people also bailed GM out, GM and Chrysler, but not Ford, during the Great Recession. I mean, you would think that they could do a little bit better than that. And I was like shocked, like, well, man, this looks so bad. Why would they not think of something like what I was thinking about? Like, okay, well, we can't do anything with this anymore. Let's give it to the people of Detroit. They can do something with it. You know what? There's hundreds of millions of dollars of old equipment in that building, like CNC machines, lathes, drill presses, welding machines, you name it. Now, a lot of it's old, but oldies but goodies, right? Good stuff. They don't build it like that anymore. And yeah, maybe it's not cutting edge enough for modern GM, but for a machine shop co-op, whew, oh, it would be beautiful. All that equipment, we could put it to such use, So what a shame to just literally, it's cheap. Think about that. It's cheaper to just board the place up and have a security guard drive around to make sure, people aren't spray painting the side of it. Like, why would they do that? And like all the they're laying off all these people. They're like stiffing the city of Detroit, the people that gave them that place and that gave them the land to put that plant there. Like they could have said, here, yeah, we can't make money here anymore, but we're gonna give this to the people of Detroit, to the city of Detroit, and to be used as a machine shop co-op where they can do whatever it is they need to do. Start their small businesses, make new technologies, start up companies like Voltec. So, yeah, I've been trying to contact the mayor of Detroit, all these different people. And that's really why I started this channel, was because it doesn't matter how good of ideas I had, how the data that I can show of like actually quantify how much carbon we can remove and how quickly and accelerate these goals that we have and do it for less money. No taxpayer money at all, actually. No taxpayer money at all. That's possible. We could do all this great stuff and make jobs for people. It really doesn't matter because they're not going to listen to me, right? They're not going to listen to me. Despite what they say about caring about small businesses, I mean, really, they don't care about small businesses until it's a big business or until it has articles written about it. So I said, hey, we have to build our own platform. We have to get out there and spread this message. And that's what EVA Live is and will be. And, this is just really practice what I'm doing tonight. But yeah, this is a better way, and we deserve this. And why, if I'm saying to a company like GM, I'm giving you a solution that's not going to cost you money, right? This is actually going to save you money, okay? Save you money. It's going to take this PR nightmare that you have with your striking workers and with your Hamtramck plant, and it's going to flip that to good PR, right? Not just make it go away, but actually make good PR for you, okay? Then it doesn't cost you anything. That's going to flip your bad PR to good PR, and it's going to increase sales for hybrid and electric vehicles for your company, not decrease. Right? Because that's a counter argument. People would say, well, they're never going to support that, what you're talking about doing, because then nobody's going to buy new vehicles. Not true. We need new vehicles. Even if we did 100% what I'm talking about doing, we would still need new vehicles. So that's just not the case. We still need new vehicles. But what we could do is just get there faster. We still need to make these new ones. But we can get to these goals that we have faster. And yeah, people will say though, well, yeah, they don't want to do that because they're not going to sell as many vehicles. No. You'll sell more vehicles because people are going to want to buy from a brand that does good things. And with social media nowadays, I think companies are starting to realize that. whether by choice, voluntary or involuntary, right? That there's you can't necessarily just screw all your customers and just because you're a really big company get away with it. Other options pop up like Tesla, for example, right? If you just leave your customers no options and you leave that door wide open for competition, then somebody will come along, and indeed they did. So yeah, that's they would sell more vehicles actually. So it's like, save you money, sell more of your hybrid electric vehicles, make your hybrid electric vehicles more profitable, and give you all this good PR, which think about the commercials, right? And I've been working on making the commercials myself, so I could just be like, here you go, look at this commercial. Maybe they would get it then if they just saw it. But you could tell such a good story, such an uplifting story by doing what I just talked about, giving that Hamtramck plant to the people of Detroit to use it as a machine shop co-op to rebuild hybrid and electric vehicles and repurpose them when that's no longer practical for solar and micro hydro. I mean, to me, that's just beautiful. The idea that we could take these workers that were laid off, this factory that was shuttered, and this vehicle that was destined for the junkyard, and we put all that together. And we create jobs, and we save people money, we create value for the community, and we help the environment, we reduce carbon. So I guess really the better question is why not? Why not? Why not do what I'm talking about? Why wouldn't they do that? Is it something that I'm just overlooking? Is it conspiracy type stuff? Or is it that they just didn't consider doing that? I think it's very possible they didn't consider doing that. And I think it's very possible that the people in our government don't consider things like that. Maybe that's why I get no response from my senators, and when I write to them and call them multiple times and say I have a plan to reopen the Hamtramck plant that will cost taxpayers nothing. I thought if I used those magic words, for sure I would get some attention, but no. So why? Why not? Is it just that I'm just a little mouse in this whole mix of things, right? Which is why I got this microphone here and this video camera. Make my voice larger and louder. Yeah, I needed a platform because I said, this is important. Other people have shows about hybrid and electric vehicles, but they're not talking about this side of it. They don't see this side of it. They don't work on these vehicles every day like we do. Being in Detroit also doesn't hurt either. There is lots that we will be able to share, and hopefully we'll get access eventually. We're trying to see. I'm not trying to be the enemy of automakers. Actually, it's the opposite. I'm trying to be their friend, and I'm trying to be. You can think of EVA as a advocacy group or like a lobbying group for hybrid electric vehicle consumers, owners, repair shops that work on them, anybody that's involved in this industry. There's not really a lobbying group for us, right? There's not really a support. Okay, there is support networks, but what I'm talking about is different. So, yeah. If we give them, now I really am losing track of my thought. But yes, I was asking why don't they listen? Why don't they respond? They being, the mayor of Detroit, my senator Gary Peters. I did speak with some of their people on the phone, just at their office, but. I never really got any response. And you would think that they would be interested in like this cutting edge startup company business that's like right here in their home state that works with hybrid and electric vehicles, but they're not. And so I said, well, why not? And then that doesn't even really matter. Why not? Because I have to just go around it. I have to build my own platform, and I will. And this channel has like 3 subscribers, I think. Well, yeah, I haven't even made a push yet. There is a long list of customers and people that, once I'm ready, I will be getting at them to subscribe to my channel, hopefully. If they like it, they don't have to. But most of them will. A lot of my customers tip me. You ever tip your mechanic? Just curious. Oh, that was another thing. Well, now I should wrap this up. Yeah, because it's late. It's 1 in the morning. I have no business being on live TV. It's TV basically. So, let me see something. There was what was I going to show? There was something I was going to show. My brain's not working very good. It was, oh crap, I can't remember. I'll remember as soon as, it was one of these graphs or something I had here. That's real specific. Very, very specific. What the heck was it? All right, well, I can't remember, so I guess I'll just have to, not discuss that part. Dang, it was something good. It was something important. I've gone over enough, though, really, for tonight. So yeah, hopefully tomorrow I'll get started at a more reasonable time. It's supposed to be once a week with this stuff, but on Sundays at 6 p.m., that's when the live show will be, where you'll be able to call in during certain times, ask questions for your more difficult problems. So if it's something simple that you can get the answer to from a YouTube video or Google, then please don't call. But if it's something that other people can't figure out, you can't figure out, you can't get a clear answer, it's not just about hybrid or electric vehicles. You can ask us any question about sustainability. But really, as far as myself and Luke, our expertise is much more on the sustainable transportation, hybrid electric vehicle technology, and then the renewable energy, and setting up those systems. So maybe if you're setting up a solar system, photovoltaic system on your house, and you are having a problem getting your power inverter to work or something, and you've gone through all the usual, troubleshooting, then that would be something you could call, and that'll be a segment. Maybe you guys will like this. Maybe you remember Car Talk with Click and Clack. I don't know. It was a radio show back in the 80s and 90s. These 2 guys from the East Coast, and they would take calls and on live radio, and people would call in, tell them the problem they're having, and they would Click and Clack could normally figure it out and at least get them pointed in the right direction. So, and people loved them, by the way. I'm sure some of the dealerships and repair shops hated them, but they were loved by the people. And so we're bringing it back with Electric Car Talk with Zip and Zap. I didn't know if I could make a name that would actually work and be somehow connected to electrification and somehow still be connected to Car Talk with Click and Clack. But it was a thing of beauty, and it came to me. So, also there will be a chat room. You can, ask questions there, comments. And yeah, I want people to be involved. That's the whole point of all this, actually, is to get people involved, get a platform, and start doing this stuff. That's my new saying. Dio. Do it ourselves. We don't need to wait on any government or anybody to do this. We can do this ourselves, and we can do it now. This stuff, it's already here. It's sitting in junkyards, a lot of it, as we speak, being scrapped, some of it. You wouldn't believe what gets scrapped unless you saw what we saw. You just wouldn't believe it. So, with all of that, thank you so much for joining us, and have a good evening or morning, whichever it is for you, somewhere in between for me. With that, I say aloha and wish you all the very best, and look forward to seeing you soon. And let's see if I can pull this off all by myself with no cameraman. All right, ready?
The master